At Huntington Beach High School. I'd like to thank all of you for coming to this very prestigious event this morning. I'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge a couple of individuals who helped put this exhibit together. First is Mr. Ted Gover, the Executive Director and Chairman for the Foundation for California. Ted, thank you very much for being here today. The other is one of our English teachers, Miss Beth Lammers, who's over on the left over here. Beth was instrumental in getting the exhibit, The Courage to Remember, here at Huntington Beach High School that you'll see here in a second, and also for our sophomore field trips that also head to the Museum of the Holocaust every year. So thank you, Beth, for all of your work in remembering one of the most memorable atrocities in humankind, and so that students get the experience here at Huntington Beach High School and to never forget. I am now going to turn it over to our Masters of Ceremony today. That is Miss Keely Gruce, our Associated Student Body President. Keely?
Thank you, Mr. McManus. Welcome to the Huntington Beach High School Courage to Remember exhibit opening ceremony. The Courage to Remember Holocaust exhibit was created by the Simon Wiesenthal Center, is sponsored by the French National Railway, SNCF, and is presented by the Foundation for California and Huntington Beach High School. At this time, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would like to take a moment to thank our distinguished guests. Dr. Clint Harwick, Superintendent of the Huntington Beach Union High School District. Dr. Dwayne Dishno, President of the Huntington Beach Union High School District School Board. Dr. Michael Simons, Huntington Beach Union High School District Board Member. Ms. Diane Carey, Huntington Beach Union High School District Board Member. Ms. Suzanne Henry, Huntington Beach Union High School District Board Member. Mr. Daniel Morris, Principal of Huntington Beach High School. Police Chief Mr. Robert Handy. Ms. Bertie Lubinsky, a Holocaust survivor. Dr. Ted Gover, Executive Director, Chairman for the Foundation for California. Natalie Moser, Chair of the Huntington Beach Human Relations Task Force, faculties and student of Huntington Beach High School. It is my pleasure to now introduce Dr. Harwick.
Thank you, students, for being here today. It's an important moment for us to go back in history and see the panels. We thank you for all the hard work behind the scenes and for a Board of Education that shares with students the important moments in history so they're not repeated. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Dishno, President of the School Board.
Good morning, and I agree. It's nice to see so many students out here this morning. On behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Huntington Beach Union High School District, I want to extend our deepest appreciation to the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the Foundation for California for making this historical exhibit of the Holocaust available to the students of Huntington Beach High School. It's our hope that this exhibit will assist in our efforts to build among our students a deeper understanding of the atrocities that occurred during the era of the Holocaust, in which 2/3 of the Jewish population of Europe was systematically targeted for extermination and murdered in death camps. Only through remembrance of those events and education of our youth can we assure that such cruelties, barbarities, and crimes will never again occur. Recent events in our county point to the clear need and importance for activities and exhibits such as this to help in educating our students and making sure such crimes against our fellow human beings never happen again. Hostility and prejudice toward any group is unacceptable. Again, our sincere thanks and appreciation for making this exhibit and the experiences that it will promote among our students available at Huntington Beach High School. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Michael Simons, a member of the board, who has some thoughts he would like to share with you.
Thank you, Dwayne. I know many of you are familiar with the genetic testing that we see advertised, Ancestry.com, 23andMe. Well, I finally succumbed to that. I was kind of curious to see where everybody came from in my family. I did 23andMe, and the results came back 99.9% Ashkenazi Jewish. It stated that my ancestors had been in that part of Eastern Europe for over 1,000 years. It gave me links to second and third generation relatives in the United States, But I wanted to try to trace my roots back further than that. I wanted to know the relatives that my grandfather, his name was Meyer Schumery, left when he brought his family, including my 3-year-old father, to this country in 1904. I contacted a cousin in Detroit, who I knew had taken a trip back to Poland a few years before, trying to find the shtetl of Ozhikov, which is where the family had lived outside of Warsaw. He told me that he could not find anything. The village was gone, even the cemetery was gone. The Nazis had used the gravestones to pave their roads. There were no records that he could find. He was able to talk to some elderly Poles who had been there since before the Nazis took over, and as he is fluent in Russian, Polish, and other languages of the area, they spoke openly to him. He was told that there were many Jews there before the war, but in a short time they were all gone, rounded up and taken away. A very few returned after the war, but they had nowhere to go and they left. Everything they had either been destroyed by the Nazis or taken away by the Poles. My maternal relatives both came from an area called Galicia, which today is the area between Poland and the Ukraine, not too far from my other ancestors in Poland. They came alone a few years apart, met in New York, got married, and my mom and her 4 brothers were born in New York. Times were tough for them, and my grandfather's brother kept trying to get him to move back to Europe as he was a successful manufacturer and my grandfather could work in the family business. We have many letters from Europe, and they tell a tale of people becoming increasingly concerned about the changes due to the rise of Nazism and of their trying to get visas to emigrate and leave the area. And then the letters stopped coming, and they were never heard from again. If my grandfather had gone back, then I wouldn't be here today. That's my story, 1,000 years of history gone. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Simons. Now I would like to invite Police Chief Mr. Handy to speak.
Thank you. You know, as a representative of the police department in the city of Huntington Beach, I just want to say a couple of things. One of the things that is most interesting and relevant, I think, to the conversation today with this exhibit is policing is really rooted in fairness, equality, protection, and justice. During this era, we saw government abuse that and carry out atrocities. It's important that we teach every generation what happened there, not only about the atrocities, but also about the incredible acts of human kindness and compassion that were shown as well during that time, just to ensure that we don't ever go backwards as a society. As was already mentioned, evidence of different events that have happened in our country and here in our county in the last couple of years is evidence that we really have to focus on educating people about our past and that we don't go back there, that we create an environment for tolerance, we create an environment for compassion, and we create an environment where everybody is treated fairly and equally. So I'm proud to be here today, and another principle about our policing is our partnerships, and I think that's evidenced up here today as well. So the Simon Wiesenthal Foundation, the Foundation for California, the Human Relations Task Force for the City of Huntington Beach. Natalie, thank you for being here. The board, thank you all for being here and representing the district, the school. Daniel, thank you for your leadership. All of you, the students, we couldn't do it without all of you either. So we really appreciate the partnerships. We're grateful that we're here today to be a part of this and looking forward to going through the exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Handy. It is with great honor that I would like to introduce Ms. Bertie Lubinsky. Ms. Lubinsky is a survivor of the Holocaust. She was 8 years old in 1940 when the Nazis invaded her hometown of Amsterdam. Her family became separated, and Ms. Lubinsky ended up living with a pastor's family in the Dutch countryside, where she was kept in hiding in their attic for 3 years. Please welcome Ms. Bertie Lewinsky, who will share us her story.
Right, I see all the attentive faces. I can't show you a picture, but I can just tell you, if you can identify yourself as being my age when this all happened. I was 8 when the German tanks rolled in, when they had taken possession of Holland, and I was 13 when the Canadians came to liberate us. So during those years, the first year or two, the Germans weren't that severe yet. We had tremendous restrictions, like we had to be in by 8 o'clock at night because we were Jewish. We were just a whole section of the population that was not wanted. 8 o'clock in, I could only play with Jewish children. I had to attend a school which had a tiny little classroom allocated to us and a Jewish teacher. Swimming pools were just out. I couldn't be in a swimming pool because it wasn't all Jewish. There were non-Jews there and they couldn't mix with me. And in the beginning, I was only 8, so I didn't know what this was all about. We weren't a particularly religious Jewish family. We were all integrated, but slowly things happened. They started then with the Yellow Star. Has anybody here heard of the Yellow Star? Well, not that many. Okay, for the Germans to find it easier to pick us up in their big trucks and take us to the concentration camps, they told us all we had to wear a yellow star. We had to sew it on our clothes. And just to prove to us why we couldn't deny doing this, we were walking along in Amsterdam with our yellow star and we saw a little group gathering. And I said, well, what's going on? And they said, well, if you see there's a Nazi soldier with a gun, and the group was getting bigger and bigger, and then he announced to all the people in the square, if anyone does not follow the rules that are stipulated, this is what happens. Because this man was a Jew, he was not wearing his star, and somebody who knew him went to the Germans and said, this is a Jew. So he shot him. And he said, this is what happens if you don't listen. So it became so bad that we were just too scared to walk in the streets. So the time came to go into hiding. Now, can you put up your hands who's heard of Anne Frank? Again, not everybody. Okay, Anne Frank was a Jewish girl, and she's very famous, who was in hiding for a year and a half. The neighbors betrayed her, and the Germans took her away to a camp, and she died. I was in hiding for 3 years, of which the last year was the attic, and I survived, but my whole family were wiped out. So I was a war orphan. When we got scared that we couldn't walk around anymore, there were people working, as we called them, the underground, and they helped the Jews. And they found a safe place for my mother and me. And my father stayed in his factory, where after a year he looked out of a window, which everybody does very normally, and some Germans happened to be looking for some gas tanks, and they saw a white face with a long nose and black hair. Well, my hair was black. And they took him, and he went to the camp in Holland, where everybody was gathered, all the Hollanders were gathered, and he was taken to Auschwitz, where he was a guest. Then came the rules that if one member of the family would just go to a work camp, they would save the whole family for having to go to camp. So we helped my aunt, my mother's older sister, to pack her suitcase with her boots for working in the camp, and she was guest in Auschwitz. And so it went. My whole family were wiped out, and so my mother and I were in hiding, and again we were, by the neighbors, we were betrayed. So we knew we had to get out, and we walked the streets knocking on doors, and I was then 10. Now, any of you can remember and identify yourself as a child of 10, walking the streets, knocking on doors, please can you take me in? Nobody wanted to do that. They said, no, we're too scared. Your daughter looks too Jewish, we can't do that. My mother was ill with TB of the hip, and her wound had to be dressed. So came night time, they told us there's a nurse in a certain place, knock on her door. She took us in, because my mother was a patient, but she said, I can't take your daughter, she looks too Jewish. So my mother phoned the underground worker, and he knew of a Dutch Reformed minister who was prepared. He lived in a little village to hide me. But we all thought it would be 3 months. So he said, that's fine, she can come. So I went on the train, had to say, now just try and imagine that. Just because I was Jewish, I had to say goodbye to my mother at the age of 10 and not know where I was going. So that was very traumatic. I went on the train with the clothes I had, because if I had a suitcase, the Germans would have known there's a little girl with a suitcase and picked me up. Got to the minister, and now I didn't know this family at all. I was 10 years old and just coming with no clothes, no possessions to a family. And the family decided I looked too Jewish. I've got to go. So of course I burst into tears. I said, well, where? There's nowhere to go. I'm sorry, I'm getting upset, but it happens. And so he took me around the village. He took a chance, and he said to everybody in the village, this is my little cousin from Amsterdam. She's come on a vacation. And everybody laughed at him and said, no, minister, you are hiding a little Jewish girl. So he came back home with me, and he said, the only thing we can do with you is cut off your hair, make it short, dye it, so that it isn't black, and you will have to stay in hiding. You will have to hide away from everybody and stay in the house. And that's what happened. And after 2 years, some Germans felt the need for accommodation, and they took half of the house that I was living in. It was a big ministry. And, well, how long have I got? 1 minute? And I'll just tell you this quickly. I was playing the piano because I was still hiding in the house. And everybody had gone to church except for the one daughter. And the next thing I found on a chair next to me, a German in a Nazi uniform. So I had to think quickly, and I just carried on playing. And he said, don't be scared. I've got a little girl at home in Germany, your age, and I will not betray you. But you've got to go up into the attic and stay there, because all my fellow Germans are strong Nazis and would kill the whole family. So for the last year of the war, I stayed in one room upstairs in the attic. And when the war finished, the Canadians came in, and I went back to Holland after a while, and there was nobody survived, none of my family. I knocked on all the doors, and there was a distant relative who had done the same. He was in the Dutch brigade, in the army, and he told his parents in South Africa, that's why I'm speaking with a South African accent, I couldn't speak any English. There's a little girl, age 13, but the whole family is wiped out. What do I do with her? They said, bring her out. I had no papers. He put me on a troop ship in a Dutch brigade uniform, pretending to be a soldier, fighting the Germans during the war, and he got me to South Africa. And just a one little anecdote, and then I'm finished. There was a party to welcome me in South Africa. I couldn't speak English. I was sitting in a corner. I was fat. I was pimply. And there were some 15-year-old boys standing there. We had no contact. And 5 years later, when I was speaking proper English and I didn't wear my glasses, I went to a party, and a certain tall, dark and handsome guy comes up to me and says, what's your name? And I said, Bertie Blom, because I was adopted by these people. And he said, do you know of that little girl that the Bloms adopted? So I said, well, that's me. And he said, wow, ugly duckling turned swan. And today we are married 67 years. And that's my story.
Thank you, Ms. Slabinski, for sharing your personal story with us today. Dr. Ted Gover, Executive Director of the Foundation for California, will say a few words of thanks.
Thank you. We're all aware of the troubling trends in society when elected officials will periodically say anti-Jewish comments, or when
local students here in Orange County, not from this school, thank God, will play an anti-Semitic, Nazi-themed drinking games. Most troubling of all, we now see that congregations here in the U.S., all throughout Europe, and now tragically in places like New Zealand and Sri Lanka, have to devote resources to protecting their members when they want to worship. These troubling trends aside, I'm really encouraged that we have so many different organizations here today, and I'm delighted to see so many students. And what a blessing it is that each of you are here at a nice institution of learning, and coupled with this exhibit, you can equip yourselves with the education to take on many of the problems coming our way. I want to thank everyone for participating, these different organizations here, and I'd like to ask each of our speakers to gather up here for a brief ribbon cutting.